Hello and welcome everyone to our third-part lecture series on the magical seals of King Solomon. Over the course of these lectures, we will journey together from the legendary beginnings of Solomon's famed ring and seal to the many afterlives across the religious and cultural landscapes of medieval and early modern Europe. Our exploration will trace how these powerful symbols were adapted and reimagined within Christian, Muslim, and Jewish magical tradition. We begin by exploring the scriptural and legendary origins of Solomon's authority over spirits and demons. From there, we will examine how magical seals attributed to Solomon emerged in the Middle Ages as central tools of coercive rituals. The third lecture will turn to the Renaissance, serving how these motifs found new life in manuscript culture, not only within magic, but also in the realms of science and art. Finally, we will focus on a unique corpus of Hebrew talismanic texts that reconfigured the Solomonic legacy specifically for Jewish ritual use. Our story revolves around the pentacles, magical objects that continue to circulate today, often found in New Age shops around the world in various forms. Typically, though not exclusively, worn as pendants, these objects are believed to serve a wide range of purposes, from attracting love or repelling enemies to bestowing invisibility, wealth, or healing. Attributed to King Solomon, these pentacles stand at the very heart of our series. We will explore how they emerged, how they were used, and how their meanings evolved, tracing a lineage that connects ancient legend to contemporary magical practice. In this lecture, we will ask how wisdom and authority became inseparable in the figure of King Solomon and why his seal emerged as their popular emblem. Tracing this idea across almost 2,000 years of text, artifacts, and ritual, we will see the seal evolve from a symbol of prudent rule into an actual instrument for summoning demons. Although our journey is chronological, a single thread binds every stop. Each era reinscribes the seal with its own vision of knowledge and power. Before we jump in, let me point you to a few scholarly resources that tackle this material with an academic, critical approach. These are some examples. Much of what you will hear echoes and builds upon such studies. Now, let us turn to Solomon's wisdom origin story. The Hebrew Bible already portrays his wisdom as almost cosmic in scope, setting the stage for everything that follows. And I quote, "God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt." The contrast with Egypt, which readers throughout the Middle Ages often imagined as the origin of esoteric wisdom, plants a seed that later authors would cultivate. If Solomon eclipsed Egyptian sages, perhaps he mastered the occult techniques they merely guarded. The Wisdom of Solomon, a Greek work from antiquity, expands this description, placing on Solomon's lips a catalogue of sciences. And I quote, "For it is he who gave me unerring knowledge of what exists, to know the structure of the world and the activity of the elements, the beginning and end and middle of times, the alternations of the solstices and the changes of the seasons, the cycle of the year and the constellations of the stars, the nature of animals and the tempers of wild animals, the powers of spirits and the thoughts of human beings, the varieties of planets and the virtue of fruits. I, that is Solomon, learned both what is secret and what is manifest. For wisdom, the fashioner of all things, taught me." Knowledge of roots gestured towards herbology and, by late antique logic, to exorcism, for herbs could drive out impure spirits. For example, the famous Jewish historian Flavius Josephus gives the episode fuller narrative shape. In his Antiquities of the Jews, he tells the story of an exorcist named Elazar, who performed an exorcism in front of the Roman Emperor Vespasian. And I quote, "I have observed a certain Elazar, one of my own race, in the presence of Vespasian, his sons, tribunes, and a large gathering of other soldiers, freeing men possessed by demons, and this was the method of his cure. He placed under the nose of the man possessed by the demon a ring, which had under its seal one of the roots which Solomon prescribed. Then, as the man was smelling it, Elazar drew out the demon throughout his nostrils, and when the man immediately fell down, adjured the demons never to come back into him, repeating Solomon's name and uttering incantations which he, that is Solomon, composed." This brief account hints that King Solomon wrote works on herbs and set down formulas for driving out demons. Josephus actually mentioned this explicitly right before the story about Elazar, and I quote, "Now so great was the prudence and wisdom which God granted Solomon that he surpassed the ancients and even the Egyptians. And God granted him even the knowledge of the technique used to overcome demons for the welfare and healing of men. He also composed incantation by which illnesses are remedied, and he left behind formulas of exorcisms by means of which those possessed expel the demon, thus never to return." The portrayal of Solomon as having the ability to overcome demons for the welfare of man suggests more than the ancient belief that demons cause disease. It hints that these spirits could also be enlisted under the right authority for human good. The notion that Solomon could turn demons from troublemakers into helpers shows up again a few centuries later. The Gnostic Christian treatise, The Testimony of Truth, describes how Solomon pressed demons into service to build Jerusalem. Once the city was complete, he imprisoned them in 7 large water jars and hid the jars beneath the temple. Much later, the Romans released the demons who fled, leaving behind empty 7 jars. Meanwhile, in Egypt, some spells in the Greek magical papyri invoke King Solomon by name. One of them, often considered Jewish in origin, serves as an exorcism. The demons are forced to reveal their true nature, while the magician mentions, in his formula, the seal of Solomon. And I quote from the spell, "I conjure you by the God of the Hebrews, Jesus, Yahweh, Yahweh, etc. I conjure you by the one who appeared to Israel in a shining pillar and a cloud by day, who saved his people from the Pharaoh and brought upon Pharaoh the 10 plagues because of his disobedience. I conjure you, every demonic spirit, to tell whatever sort you may be, because I conjure you by the seal which Solomon placed on the tongue of Jeremiah, and he told, you, that is the demon, also tell whatever sort you may be." Here we see Solomon's seal walking like a badge of ultimate authority. Simply naming it marshals the right powers against the demon. The demon has no choice but to speak, while the magician drives the lesson home by recalling what happened to Pharaoh when he ignored the divine word. All these trends, each celebrating Solomon's wisdom and many crediting him with the power to banish or harness demons, reached their high point in the Testament of Solomon, parts of which scholars date to the 5th or 6th century. We can set aside the lively arguments about its original language and provenance. The tale itself is enough to show that the image of Solomon as Lord of Demons was still going strong in late antiquity. The Testament of Solomon opens with a young Templar builder who is tormented each night by the demon named Ornias. Moved by concern for the boy, Solomon prays for power over the demon. God sends the angel Michael, who delivers a ring set with a gem engraved with a seal that is Solomon's seal. Armed with the ring, Solomon summons and interrogates Ornias. The demon tells Solomon about his powers and admits that he is ultimately controlled by the angel Uriel. Solomon promptly invokes Uriel to bind Ornias, then orders him to fetch the demon's chief Beelzebul or Beelzebub. Using Beelzebub power, demons begin to present themselves one by one to Solomon, describing the illnesses they cause and revealing how they can be defeated. Solomon puts some of these demons to work on the temple, others he imprisons in various containers and, on occasion, vessel stores inside the temple itself. The demonology is anything but uniform, suggesting that the text stitched together lore from several sources. Many of the spirits, such as Asmodeus or Ashmedai, are already familiar from other traditions. Solomon's relationship with Asmodeus, depicted in the Testament of Solomon as that of master and subject, takes an interesting turn in the Babylonian Talmud. Let's read the story about the two from Tractate Gittin, and I quote, Solomon kept Ashmedai with him until he completed building the temple. One day he stood with Ashmedai alone. He said to Ashmedai, in what way are you, the demons, greater than us? Ashmedai said to him, take the chain engraved with God's name off me and give me your ring with God's name engraved on it, and I will show you my strength. Solomon took the chain off him and he gave him his ring. Ashmedai swallowed the ring and grew until he placed one wing in the heaven and one wing on the earth. He threw Solomon a distance of 400 passengers. Solomon circulated from door to door collecting charity. Now he disappeared, right? The sages said to Benaiah, does the king require you to be with him? They all searched for Solomon, where he is. Benaiah said to him, no. They sent to the queens and asked, does the king come to be with you? The queen sent a response to them, yes, he comes. They sent a request to the queens, check his feet to see if they are human feet. The queens sent a response to the sages, he always comes in socks, and it is not possible to see his feet. The queens continue discussing the king's behavior, or strange behavior, one might say. And he demands of them, that is, the queens, to engage in sexual intercourse when they are menstruating. And he also demands that Bathsheba, his mother, engage in sexual intercourse with him. Once the Sanhedrin heard this, they understood that this was an impostor and not actually Solomon. They brought Solomon, gave him a ring and the chain on which the name of God was carved. When Solomon entered, Ashmedai saw him and fled. The Gemara adds, and even so, although Ashmedai fled, Solomon was fearful of him. Here, it's obvious that Solomon's power over Asmodeus or Ashmedai depends on two objects. The demon is bound by a chain, and the king clutches a ring engraved with the divine name. Remove either, and the power dynamic tilts in Ashmedai's favor. Indeed, even with the chain and ring in place, Solomon still fears the demons. The same pairing, a binding chain and a power ring, turns up again on the Babylonian incantation bows, those magical objects covered with formulas and, at times, sketches of demons in chains. Several bows even mention King Solomon and his ring as the force that binds the malevolent spirit. For a deeper dive into these artifacts, I highly recommend Dr. Abigail Mankin-Bamberger's lecture series at Beit Avichai. Legends about King Solomon flourished, and just as certain books were tied to his powers, so too were particular places. As we mentioned, both the Testimony of Truth and the Testament of Solomon claim he sealed demons in jars beneath the temple. We find the same motifs woven together in the Breviary of Jerusalem, a medieval guide to sacred sites for pilgrimage, where the text tells us, and I quote, "The Basilica of Constantine lies in the middle of the city. There is a great apse to the west, where the 3 crosses were discovered. Around that apse there are 12 marble columns set in a circle, marvelous to see, and atop each column there are 12 silver vases, in which Solomon sealed the demons. From there you enter into Golgotha, where there is a large court. Here the Lord was crucified. A great deal of gold and silver adorn the screens, and at that spot there is the platter upon which the head of John the Baptist was carried. There is also the horn that was used to anoint David and Solomon. In that same place there is the ring made from amber that Solomon used to seal the demons." As we learn from the Breviary of Jerusalem, traditions about Solomon as the master of demons took root not only in text and magical object, but also in the very geography of the sacred. This image was hardly confined to Jewish, Gnostic, or Christian circles. The Arabic Islamic world embraced it as well. The Quran itself portrays the jinn as Solomon's workforce. In the 21st surah, we read, and I quote, "We, that is God, harnessed the stormy wind for Solomon, so that he sped by his command. And we made some of the jinns subservient to him, to die for him and to do other works besides. We were watching over them." In another surah, when Solomon gathers his troops, he also gathers, and I quote, "host of jinn, men, and birds." Solomon's mastery of demons is also recounted in 34th surah, where we read that, and I quote, "some of the jinn worked under his control with his Lord's permission. If one of them deviated from our command, we let him taste the suffering of the blazing flame." This also appears in another surah, and I quote, "So we gave him power over the wind, which at his request ran gently wherever he willed, and the jinn, every kind of builder and diver, and others chained in fetters. All bent to Solomon's will." The Quranic portrait of Solomon, together with Jewish, Christian, and Gnostic strands, found expression later in the writings of the Brethren of Purity. This late 10th century circle in Basra produced 51 wide-ranging epistles on philosophy, science, and many more. One of these epistles is the case of the animals versus men before the king of the jinn, in which King Solomon is presented as the master of demons, yet the demons claim that the king's power actually derives from them, and I quote, "In Solomon's time, God strengthened his dominion and subjected the demons and jinn to him," to Solomon. "Solomon subdued the kings of the earth, and the jinn boasted to mankind that he had achieved this by their help. Without their aid," they said, he would have been just another human king. In one story, Solomon dispatches his troops to chase down a band of runaway demons, teaching them how to use a binding incantation to restrain the jinn. And I quote, "A band of jinn escaped from Solomon, and one rebelled against him. Solomon sent troops after them and trained them to snare the jinn with spells, incantations, magic words, and revealed verses, using sorcery to confine them. He produced a book for this purpose, found in his treasury after his death. Until he died, Solomon kept the rebel jinn at work with arduous tasks." Later in the epistle, we learn a bit more about the nature of these binding spells or incantations. And I quote, "Even evil, misbelieving and iniquitous jinn are more obedient to their leaders and more steadfast in loyalty to their kings than wicked, depraved, or sinful humans. The splendid obedience shown by the demons and rebellious jinn to Solomon, peace be upon him, proves this. For when they were in his thrall and he set them to onerous and exhausting tasks, they made whatever he wished. So well do the jinn obey their chiefs that if some rebel genie troubles an Adamite with madness, terror, confusion, or panic, and the human enchanter calls for help from the leader of that genie's tribe, or from their king or his forces, they throng and rally around, doing just as they are commanded and forbidden with that person." The epistle explains that this adjuration relies on a hierarchical principle. The operator invokes the name of a king, prince, sect leader, or military commander to force the demon's compliance. Doing so, it says, unless the chief figures in the hierarchy. They seize and punish the spirit until it obeys. And just as the earlier writers believed Solomon compiled a manual of such spells, the Brethren of Purity maintain that Solomon left behind a book he wrote, which was found in his treasury after his death. That fascination with the hidden Solomonic handbook of spells also provided other Quranic commentators with fertile ground. The great Quranic commentator Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, for example, commented on the verse about the two angels Harut and Marut who taught mankind sorcery. In his commentary, al-Tabari wrote that after Solomon's death, the demons buried the book under his throne, sealed it with the royal signet to mislead future finders. According to al-Tabari, it was the Jews who uncovered the book and, in doing so, fell prey to the demon's deception. In other words, the magical book attributed to King Solomon re-emerges here, now recast as a forged manual of magic sealed with Solomon's own ring. There are loads more stories about Solomon and his demons. What we've touched on is really just the tip of the iceberg. Most of those tales don't come from practicing magicians, but from historians and theologians, each adding their own spin. So now, let's flip the script. We'll crack open the actual magical manuscripts and see how the magicians themselves, who wanted to harness the same power over demons, talk about these themes. One of the most influential works in this tradition is the medieval Liber Razielis, that is, the Book of Raziel. Compiled from a variety of sources and translated into Castilian and later Latin, at the order of King Alfonso the Wise, It is an exceptionally rich magical compendium. Throughout the work, King Solomon narrates many sections himself, predominantly in the first person. For our purposes, I am less interested in the book's full contents than in the way it shapes Solomon's persona. Let us start with the opening passage, where the king himself introduces the work, and I quote, "And now that after I, Solomon, reached the age of 32 years, on the 5th day of the month of Av, the 5th month of the Hebrews, on Friday, as the sun was setting in the sign of Leo. On that very day, there was sent or delivered to me, Solomon, from Babylon by a certain prince, who was greater and more venerable than all the Chaldeans of that time, a certain book called Raziel, and 7 books, which we call 7 reasons. And this book is of the greatest virtue and the highest secret. And the name of the prince who sent it to me was Zamekliton. And 2 wise men brought and handed to me. One of them was named Harimazael, and the other was called Zazont." That's a strange passage, right? But several interesting things are going on in that passage. We don't have time to unpack them all, so I'll flag just 2. First, the narrator marks the delivery with a hyper-specific astrological moment, right? Friday at sundown, with the sun in Leo. By locking the book to that celestial snapshot, the compiler is actually saying something along the line of, this text is special. It burned under a royal star alignment. The second thing is that the sender is a Babylonian prince greater than all the Chaldeans. That taps into a long-running idea from late antiquity through early Islam that Babylon, or the East more broadly, is the cradle of magical know-how. This mirrors el-Tabari's story of a demonic book hidden under Solomon's throne, and the Brethren of Purity's assertion that a single Solomonic volume lay in the royal treasury. In any case, Babylonian expertise authenticates the text while simultaneously acknowledging Solomon's authority to receive and surpass its knowledge. In some versions of Liber Razielis, the compiler ensures that Solomon is portrayed as a king who had access to ancient knowledge. It recounts an encounter between Solomon and a wise, mysterious man who advises him to open the Ark of the Covenant. And I quote, "I, Solomon the king, have long and earnestly pursued wisdom, the sciences of the heavens, the hidden forces, wonders, and miracles that can be grasped only by those who act with perfect faith and ardent desire. Then an ancient elder addressed me, and he said, 'My lord the king, you are a man of action. Yet if you want to become truly wise and knowledgeable, you must first be steeped in learning. No one now speaks of or comprehends the mysterious locked within the Ark of the Covenant. Thus, open its doors and locks, and you will discover all the secrets and powers of the ancients, along with great teachings drawn from the Torah.' And Solomon brought forth the ark and searched out every book of Moses, Aaron, Noah, and Adam, as well as those of Enoch, whom some call Hermes, and many, many others. All the subtle and profound writings that could be found in every corner of the world, he gathered in one place. So, what's happening in this Razielis passage? Solomon, in search of wisdom, encounters an elder who gives him something like a pep talk that sounds like a plot twist from Indiana Jones, right? The Ark of the Covenant is basically a locked up library. Pop it open and you'll find the big secrets everyone else has forgotten. Remember the jars under the temple or the stories about a hidden book under Solomon's throne? Same pattern here. Dangerous knowledge gets sealed up. Solomon alone is trusted or daring enough to crack it open. And what does he pull out? A mashup of every heavyweight text you can imagine. The books of Moses and Aaron, law from Noah and Adam, and even the writings of Enoch, whom later readers identified as Hermes Trismegistus. Because Solomon is portrayed as the person who successfully tamed and organized that universal knowledge, his ring or seal becomes almost like a shortcut for the whole package. Thus, some magicians just flash what they perceived as Solomon's seal and signals that they were tapping into the same authority Solomon had. Using Solomon's credentials, the forces of the universe are expected to comply. Indeed, we have some magical manuals that explicitly refer to this idea. In a ritual that aims to summon demons and is preserved in several languages from the early modern period, the magician is supposed to present the summoned demons a sacred sign attributed to Solomon. The demons then respond, and I quote the response of the demons, right? "You who adjured us, surely you must be a descendant of King Solomon, may he rest in peace, or one of his disciples. Since Solomon's day, no human has laid eyes on us except you. Were it not for the mighty power and strong hand of the names by which you have bound us, we will tear you and all your companions apart. But because you have adjured us by that great power and those holy names, we are forced to carry out your every request and desire." A formula in another text contains an adjuration attributed to King Solomon that emphasizes the demon's obligation to obey. Whoever hears this adjuration of Solomon, son of David, the great king, this utterance spoken in the name of the Almighty, and, having heard it from the mouth of the magician, does not immediately present himself before us and appear to our side, we will exact a wondrous vengeance upon him. He, the demon, will be afflicted with a virulent leprosy and with every vile and loathsome disease. Here we have a classic do-it-or-else sentence, and it pulls together several strands we have been following. First, notice the chain of authority. The writer calls the text an adjuration of Solomon, son of David, and then doubles down by invoking the name of the Almighty. This pairing, emphasizing the divine source of Solomon's power over demons, leaving no excuse for a demon's non-appearance. Second, the threat is intensely somatic, virulent leprosy and every vile and loathsome disease. Earlier sources threatened rebellious spirits with chains, jars, or angelic whips. Here, the punishment is disease imagery, ripped straight from biblical plague language. Demons, long pictured as the agents of human sickness, are told that the very affliction they unleash will boomerang back on them. Finally, Note the formula's unmistakable tone. Show up now or face the consequences. This echoes the hierarchical principle we saw earlier. A demon is deemed part of a bureaucracy. If it ignores a superior order, penalties escalate. The magician merely reads out the warrant, sometimes signed with King Solomon's royal seal. In an 18th century Hebrew text that presents a complex ritual for summoning demons and also attributed to King Solomon, we find an interesting story that combines some of the motifs we observed. And now I'll read from the introduction to this manual. These are the words of Astaroth, the disciple of King Solomon, peace be upon him. In the 9th year of the reign of Shishak, king of Egypt, that is the 5th year of the reign of Rehoboam, son of Solomon, when I, Astaroth, lived in Jerusalem, Shishak came up to seize Rehoboam's treasury with a great army. And he took all the silver and gold he found there in the treasures of King Solomon. And he also took many books of various languages and wisdom. And the tyrants among our people told the ministers of Shishak that I, that is Astaroth, was the disciple of King Solomon, peace be upon him. And with me he could hear and grasp understanding and insight from all the wisdom that was written in those books. And I was captured by the order of the king, and I was brought to Egypt. And I was imprisoned for many days until he remembered me and took me out of the darkness and brought me in front of the king. And the king commanded me to explain to him with great clarity all that is found in those books. And I saw this book among them, this manual for summoning demons, right? And I realized its greatness and virtue, and I place it inside the chambers of my heart, since I knew that there is nothing like it on earth. And I too became wise by it, and I achieved wisdom and wealth and power and understanding. And I planned to hide this gem, so that it would not fall into the hands of the sages of the nations of the world who do not go by the name of Israel, and are like a thorn in the eye of our people. But I could not do it, since I saw that our sins caused the greatness of our enemy. And by this book, they understood three false faiths of inverted beliefs, which are roots that bear gold and wormwood. And 3 winds will be stopped in the 3 cities of their kingdoms in the south, north, and east, until the Lord brings back the remnant of his people. And then this book that he bound and constrained will be destroyed and demolished by the appearance of the righteous. Blessed is he whose will is this. The passage, this introduction, introduces Astaroth, the disciple of King Solomon, and in doing so shifts attention from the royal sage himself to a trusted heir of his wisdom. Moreover, the narrative repurposes a well-known biblical episode, Shishak's sack of Jerusalem. Yet, instead of emphasizing gold and silver, as in the biblical source, the author foregrounds books of various languages and wisdom. This resonates with earlier material we have seen. For example, El-Tabari's demons hide the magical manual under Solomon's throne. The Brethren of Purity speak of a Solomonic book locked in the royal treasury. In any case, the true plunder is intellectual, not monetary. Whoever seizes the manuals controls the magic. This is why Astaroth's immediate instinct is to hide it, lest sages of the nations weaponize its content. The citation deepens the theme by predicting that the stolen book will animate 3 false faiths, yet will ultimately be destroyed at the eschaton, when divine justice restores order. Our last stop today, and the bridge to our next lecture, is the Candariri. Solomon's theme surfaces again in a mysterious Latin treatise from the 13th or 14th century called De Novem Candariri, or On the 9 Candarii. The text lays out 9 medallions, each covered with its own blend of inscriptions and magical symbols, and explains how a practitioner can utilize them for different purposes. The entire work is attributed to King Solomon, and the medallions are presented as a direct heavenly revelation granted to him. Let's read from the opening prayer. I'm quoting here from a later Hebrew translation, though Latin copies appear as early as the 15th century. And I quote, "O holy Adonai, mighty and compassionate On, you who are the Alpha and Omega, you who granted wisdom to Solomon, son of David, beyond that of all humankind, and to him revealed this Candariri or Candarii for the protection of his body, his soul, and his salvation." That brief invocation neatly ties together the threads we have followed this lecture. Solomon's unmatched wisdom, the constant recycling of his name for magical legitimacy, and the transformation of abstract law into concrete, portable objects. This is exactly the story I would like to uncover regarding the pentacles, which we will address in more detail in the next lectures. So, I would like to give a brief conclusion before ending this lecture. The image of Solomon as both the wisest of men and master of demons carried real weight already from antiquity. That aura of authority spilled over into literature. Whole books were credited to him. Some, the sources say, sprang from his own divinely infused mind. Others he compiled or translated from surrounding cultures, working alone or with trusted pupils and scribes. This same wisdom supposedly gave him command over demons, and practical handbooks on summoning and subduing spirits often invoke his name as the seal of legitimacy. In our next lecture, we'll watch these centuries-old far-flung motifs crystallize into tangible objects. We'll touch briefly on magical gems, then turn to the Candariri, which we just spoke, and the pentacles attributed to King Solomon. Thank you.